Welcome to Goshen Prepping. Thank you for joining us. Time is running out. We only have a few days left, and we're talking about specifically the debt ceiling. And a lot of people are talking about this, but I want you to understand what's happening here because people simply think it must be, well, it's just another debt ceiling problem. And that very well may be. And I'm not trying to take sides at all between Republicans and Democrats because honestly, I think they're both to blame here. But in this particular case, the House Republicans have already passed a bill making so let's go ahead and raise the debt ceiling again, which again, in my opinion, in a lot of ways, that's a bad thing to do. We need to raise the debt ceiling because it's going to, if not, cause major catastrophic problems, but we need to balance the budget. And that's what the Republicans have said. If this bill we passed, if you agree to this, Biden, then it's going to make it so it's actually going to cut $4.8 trillion out of the budget. So therefore, it actually makes it work better in the long run. He wants no part of that. Any type of cuts at all, Biden refuses. And of course, when I'm saying Biden, I mean his puppeteers. I really don't think he's actually cognizant in anything he actually does. And it's simply people pulling his strings that's making this happen. But either way, when I say Biden, I'm talking about them. But Biden refuses to actually have any cuts at all. He doesn't want cuts. He wants big spending. And when we talk about the ceiling, well, the ceiling's all about raising it so we can borrow more money. And all the presidents, again, are guilty of this, especially in our modern times, going back to the 80s. I'll show you a graph in this in a moment. But what we see is the presidents borrowing more money, borrowing far more money to make it so literally we can't do anything without actually having this huge, massive debt on our shoulders. The White House said they will not do anything as far as cutting money. Instead, they want to, raise taxes. And they say it's not going against the middle class, but we're looking at the super rich. But the super rich, if you didn't know, are already being taxed like it's crazy anyway. But this is a normal trend. And it's going to, as far as raising the debt ceiling, it's going to be more and more likely we're going to see this taking place, not just now, but in the future as well. I think they're going to agree on this. I think they're going to actually raise the debt ceiling again. Personally, they may not. But even if they do agree to this, a time is going to come when eventually they can't anymore, borrowing way too much money. And if that happens, it's going to default on our loans. The best way to understand this, it's really simple. Let's say in your house, you have some credit cards and you use those credit cards to pay just regular bills, like even just buying groceries and stuff, and you're not paying the credit cards back and you're actually having some debt. And then guess what? Now the time comes for you to pay the credit card and you're like, I don't quite have enough money to pay this credit card. So what I'm going to do, while I still have a good credit rating, I'm going to get another credit card. So you start racking that one up. Now you have a monthly payment. Minimum payments, by the way, obviously will kill you. And then when it finally comes due for that one, let's just get another credit card. That's exactly what happens with this debt ceiling continuously being raised. But understand, eventually a time's going to come where you're not going to be able to pay on those credit cards and you're going to default. Maybe declare bankruptcy, even if you don't. And that default is going to trash your credit rating. It's going to make it so you can't do anything to function. And that's exactly an easy way to understand how it's going to happen in the United States if they decide not to raise this debt limit. It's going to put us in a situation in which America will no longer be the top of the economic ladder. Right now, United States currency, practically speaking, is used all around the world. We have the highest as far as our credit limit goes, the highest credit rating, let me put it that way. But if we default on this, those days are gone. Just like your credit would tank with credit cards, the United States credit will tank as well. And therefore, what's going to happen ultimately, inevitably, our economy is going to crash. If we default on this, if we don't raise the debt limit, if we don't pay back at least the interest on this, our economy will crash. Look at this article from the BBC. This is a great article, by the way. A simple guide to the debt ceiling. They talk about the debt ceiling, what happens if they default on it. They won't pay for federal employees, military, Social Security, Medicare, all kinds of problems. If it's not raised, all those people will not get money. They'll simply not get paid, even to defend our country. But this graph is what I really want to show you. It talks about regardless of administration, regardless if it's Republican or Democrat, we see constant more and more spending. You'll see here during the Reagan years, then we switch to Democrat, back to Republican, Democrat, and it's going up and up and up. But there's a couple of things I want to show you on this, that why it's so important for you to see this. First off, you can see back in the 80s into the 90s that, there was some growth, there was. Here it's actually not too bad. It's starting to go up. Every time you see like a little flat area, like right here or right here, that is actually the debt ceiling being raised. So you can see it's raised all the time. So what's the issue here? Well, first off, they won't negotiate to raise it this time. But secondly, look at this. We're not looking at a linear graph. Follow the cursor. We're not looking at a linear graph. We're looking at, especially over the last 10 years, exponential graph. It's exponential. And any economist will tell you, when you see something that's exponential and taking off like this, it is flat out unsustainable. It is going to collapse. You cannot continue this. I mean, look at this jump in the debt ceiling right here. Unbelievably massive. And now they want to raise it again. So even though I'm not for government spending, I am all for a limited government. I'm all for free trade and free market, so we can actually do what we need to, and fine, pay taxes. But the more the economy grows in the United States, the more industry, the more people that work, the more taxes being paid, the more money. There you go, government, use the money instead of borrowing more. And when I say borrowing more, we're talking about printing more. We saw the same thing in pre-Nazi Germany as they printed off a ridiculous amount of money, which crashed their economy even more. So the question comes down to, why won't Biden, or specifically his puppeteers, negotiate? Why won't he? I mean, they'll tell you basically that it's, well, because he wants to raise more taxes and stuff. But ultimately, what we've seen in the past, it doesn't matter which president you talk about, they often use this as a bargaining chip. You know what? I'm not going to negotiate with you. I'm not going to raise that debt unless you give me this, unless you actually sign over and give me this particular, whatever the case may be. In this case, they want to raise taxes. Or option number two, and I think this is actually where we're heading. I think he wants to crash the economy. And again, it may not happen with this debt raise, the debt limit raise, but it's going to happen eventually. I think he wants the economy to crash. I don't think this is a Democrat-Republican thing, because the thing is, when you actually look at a lot of Democrats, the majority of Democrats also want cuts in our spending. So in this case, Biden, in a lot of ways, stands alone wanting to make this happen. Because again, we see both Democrats and Republicans, well, in a lot of ways, you could say are equally trying to help the situation, but we could also say are equally trying to make it worse. But as you see this exponential growth, again, it is unsustainable. This is a bad situation we're in right here, unless it somehow curves down, which right now, that's not what they're talking about doing. Biden wants it to continue to go up. So I'm going to say it again, even if they decide, well, go ahead and sign a deal this time, and we're going to raise the debt ceiling, it eventually is going to get to a point where the economy is going to crash. Unless they turn around now and try to fix it, which it seems to be Biden and his puppeteers don't want that to happen. At least some Republicans are trying to cut spending. No, we're actually seeing more and more stifling as far as printing out money. It is going to take the United States away from the top. So here's what we know. And here's why I think Biden is actually trying to crash the economy. Number one, we have to look at the whole thing is unsustainable. We can't actually make this work anymore. It will crash. And what it's going to do is actually take away from the United States being the top, and we're going to have another country taking over in the New World Order. The United States will not be the top anymore. It happened to Great Britain in the 40s, switched to America. Britain's still there. So it's not the end of the world for Americans for this happening, economically speaking. But it could actually, politically speaking, be the end of America, because Biden and his puppeteers, it is absolutely clear that they are in bed with China. So it's not simply just switching to a new country. Australia, Japan. I'm being facetious, by the way. The economies of these countries are not doing so great either. You know, there are strong allies, and we're all basically in trouble. But China, their economy is growing. And I want you to understand that they're not completely sustainable either. I'm not going to right off say China is actually untouched when it comes to this. They have a lot of problems and struggles. But I'll tell you, they're actually nothing like America. In the United States, we're actually in far worse trouble than them. But China is actually emerging as a world leader as they continuously sell their Chinese garbage around the world, not to mention spread around the world politically. They are growing like crazy. And we're also talking about their military too. Again, right now, no match to the United States. But it is coming to a time in which, as the United States, we have more and more troubles. China is actually developing a more stronger military. Eventually, it could overtake the United States. It's going to be a little while before that happens. Even worse, China, Russia, other allies, all of them are now basing all their currency on the yuan, the Chinese dollar, if you want to put it that way. So even though right now, the United States dollar has actually been recognized around the world. You know, back in my time in the military, you can go anywhere and actually use American money. That time is passing. And now we're seeing a whole bunch of these countries joining together under China and Russia, using the yuan basically as the new currency. So we're already starting to see a shift into this new world order, and all it takes is America to collapse for that final fruition to take place. And just when we have Biden and the puppeteers in a position to try to make it crash, I think that's why we're seeing this problem with the debt ceiling. I think it has nothing to do with raising taxes. I think, simply put, they want to crash the United States. They want to bring down the United States, and the debt ceiling is just another way to basically have a notch to make that happen. It's going to cripple our country. And even more so, obviously, we're talking about crippling you and me. And in the process, it's not just economy, but turning America more into a socialistic country. And how can I prove this? Because Biden wants to tax more, but the second thing he wants to do is drastically increase the social welfare programs of America. And I'm going to be the first to tell you, I think we need some social welfare programs in America. We do need it. We have, of course, we as a country should take care of people. But the Republicans at this point are trying to make it and say, you know what? If you're on some kind of social welfare program, if you can, you need to work. Whereas we're seeing the Democrats saying, no, let's go ahead and try to put everybody on social welfare as AI is picking up and we're seeing massive job loss. It is taking us away from our free trade America into a socialistic country. Not simply taking away socialism or our social rights, free trade, but also our constitutional rights. It is sending us down a path that's going to permanently change America from what we actually have from the way the intentions of our founding fathers. And it's not just the United States, but all the allies of the United States are going to follow along too. We need to be prepared for this because it is coming, and that is their goal. The debt ceiling is simply just one more excuse to head us down that path. And again, the debt ceiling may pass this time. It might. Maybe it'll pass. Maybe we'll be fine. But a time will come, because we are unsustainable, that a debt ceiling will not be passed, and therefore our economy will crash. We need to be prepared for this, and that's why we have Goshen Prepping. Prepare for this, stockpile, do what you can, because rough times are certainly ahead.